Welcome. I am Danielle. I am Lady of the Lake Country on Instagram, and I am woefully behind on Instagram. Hoping to get there at some point. My sweet husband made me this, and when I try to put it into PowerPoint mode, it is not cooperating very well, so I'm just going to scroll it. Anyway, so I built this to focus on the Padme builds that I have done in the last few years. And I have done them because I am currently a mother, and I needed something happy to go back to. And I am maybe a not so typical cosplayer in that I am both not really a new cosplayer, but also not a super experienced career cosplayer. And I am also going back to it very later from before cosplay was really called cosplay and the prequels came out. I made costumes for each of the prequels. What are those called? Premieres. I made costumes for each of the premieres, and my mother didn't think that she's here today too. My mother didn't think that I was serious with the first one. I came to her and told her that I wanted to make the parade gown to go see the show when it came out. And she went, oh, that's great, okay. And so I bugged her, and she's like, well, you can get some fabric if you really want to. So I went and dug around in her fabric and cut out petals and put them on some kind of piece of fabric that I made into a cape. And I hot glued and hand sewed the whole thing together. And after that, she helped me with the next two. And then I didn't really do anything with it for a really long time. And then when I had my son, I had a little bit of time to think about that a little bit more, and I started to kind of tinker with making costumes and learning sewing skills a little bit better again. And I started to make a few other costumes, and then about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I don't know, right before COVID maybe, I decided it's now or never. I better just start making costumes that I've always dreamed about making. And my one that I had always dreamed the most about, I might come back to the skill set later, but the one that I'd always dreamed the most about, if this thing will continue, was mashing Belle and Padme, because as a kid, those were my two favorites. So it was like this childhood dream to try and bring those two together. And I thought, why not? I'll just try it. And so I started in. Meanwhile, I have learned a lot of my skills here, there, and everywhere. There's a lot of different places that you can pick these up. There's formal training and everything. I've had some of both. I audited classes that wasn't my degree at all. I just went and audited some clothing construction classes and learned some proper techniques, and then I wound up getting a job in a tailoring and alterations shop part-time and picked up a lot of things there. And then you meet other people that teach you things, and YouTube University is fabulous. So between all of that, I started to pick up skills, and I knew I could do hand embroidery. And I had made a corset before with one of the classes that I had gone to and audited. And so I thought, okay, let's do it. Let's make the corset, which I have laying over here. And nowadays, so this is a mash between the picnic. It's called either the picnic gown or the meadow gown from episode 2, from Attack of the Clones. And it has this beautifully, elaborately embroidered corset on it that is originally done with machine embroidery. But I thought, I really don't know, if I can figure out how to digitize that into machine embroidery fast enough. My learning curve that was a really steep learning curve, and I was just getting into machine embroidery. But I thought I can go ahead and hand do it, which was the way most people would do it. But I chose to do it and try to very meticulously recreate the shading in it. And I was really happy with the way that it came out. I did the little peekaboo holes as well. And when I got through all to the end of it, it was really fun to watch, because the way I did this is there is stabilizer that you can purchase that you can print on it, and it is self-adhesive. And so I printed the design on this self-adhesive stabilizer, and it's wash away. So I stuck it on the fabric. So it's like, I did it like coloring, where you're just doing hand embroidery and coloring. Nowadays, there is a machine embroidery file out there that somebody sells that seems to be pretty decent. It is not complete. Again, you still have to play with getting the shading if you want the complete accuracy. But I wound up being really happy with the way that came out. I barely got it done. I had the deadline of when Celebration, so this would have been 2019 because I had the deadline of Celebration Chicago. And I thought, great, I started like in January and Celebration was in April. So I thought, sure, no problem, I can get this done. 300 hours of embroidery later, I barely got the corset done. So I think I finished the corset between patterning it out and everything and doing all the embroidery. I think I finished the corset 2 weeks or something before Celebration, and I went, I have to wear this. What am I going to wear it on? And I had because my mother had helped me make a version of the picnic gown when episode 2 came out. And so when I had pulled that out, I used some of the fabric for the corset, and I still had the skirt. And I thought, I'll just do this. It'll fit over a hoop skirt, I'll do it. And so I threw that over a hoop skirt, and I pulled up and gathered the top layer, and it worked for that. I had already dyed the shawl part to it as well. And that is something that I feel like you run into all the time with these, especially builds like Padme builds, where you're trying to find very specific fabrics in very specific shades. And if you don't get the right shade, then it just doesn't look the same. So this was my first foray into, I need to learn to dye fabric. So here's the real problem. When you dye fabric, if you have any experience with that whatsoever, there are two kinds of fabric. There is natural fiber and there is synthetic fiber. Dyeing natural fiber is relatively easy. Natural fibers like dye, so they will take it and pick it up easier. Polyester, synthetic, not so much. So in order to do that, you have to keep it at almost a boil, and you have to have a pot big enough for it to move around in. And the real fun part of dyeing polyester is if you are dyeing, like say I was trying to dye, I dyed the fabric for the skirt and for the shawl with the same dye. I don't know the exact polyester content, but polyesters vary, and if it has some rayon or some spandex or anything like that in it, it's going to massively change how it comes out. And so you don't necessarily get the same shade. Testing is really important for this. But it turned out okay. I was happy enough with that, and I learned an awful lot about how hot you have to keep fabric for dyeing polyester. And anyway, it matched well enough. It was my little shawl up there, and then I had to tackle the wig. And so I got a pre-made wig that was just a long spirally wig, and there's all kinds of places that you can buy wigs, but this is I skipped over this part of my presentation at the beginning, but Padme builds include enormous amounts of skill set if you want to try and get into, if you're wanting to try and do it all yourself, which that is what makes me happy. I want to be able to do it all myself, and so I've ended up taking jewelry making classes. I've ended up learning and going to some wig workshops and befriending a friend who likes to hand tie his own wigs. I haven't gone there yet, but learning a little bit more about how to handle synthetic hair, how to sew hair wefts. That's what I wound up doing with that one. In addition to sewing and tailoring and jewelry making and millinery with millinery wire, like so many different things. And to me, that's part of what's fun of it. My ADHD really likes okay, we're done with this, let's hop over to this and learn this skill now. So with this one, it was great because I had multiple things that were handwork that I could just take everywhere with me. And while I was doing the corset, the original corset, they took the flowers from the cape, and they just cut them off and put them on the corset and on the headband. There is a curtain, like a sheer curtain that you can buy at Walmart usually, that is the same pattern that most people use if they're making the meadow gown. And that's what I used. And I cut them all off and went, those flowers are really kind of sad looking, so I ended up embroidering them over them a little bit, which is what I did with the headband as well. And the headband, the original is one piece of ribbon that has kind of the embroidered decorate edging piece and the middle piece on it. I ended up doing two pieces that I sewed together and then embroidered the little like edge. It looks like a rope on the edge, but that little hand embroidery I wound up doing. I happen to know how to crochet, and that was really convenient. You can buy the bun snoods online. There is somebody that makes them. Hers were not 100% accurate. And so I went, well, I know how to crochet. I can figure that out. She sells ones. The original have the 5-point star in the middle. The ones that you can buy online have 6-point stars. And I went, I can fix that. And so I made my own bun snoods as well. So with this one, I wound up doing all of the little pieces like here, there, and everywhere, and just continually updating. And I think that that is also something that these big builds lend themselves towards, is just continually finding things and ways to improve it. A lot of times you have to settle with, okay, this is wearable right now. I'll get to this thing right now. This is wearable right now, and I'm really proud that it's wearable right now. So the next thing I tackled was I wanted to do a 1940s Amidala. I had found this design in the center is by the artist Stitchy Button on Instagram, and she had done this whole postcard series, and I'd ordered the postcards from her, and I thought they were darling. She'd done this whole series with the idea that if the original trilogy had happened in the years they came out, like 1977 and 80 and 80, well, that would have set the prequel trilogies in the 1940s and 50s. And so she did these designs based on that. So I chose to do the throne room because it was so iconic, and I had just gotten back into swing dancing, and I thought, okay, it'd be so fun to just practice the skills that I've picked up, and I'll make this dress. And I ended up entering it into a cosplay contest thinking, this will be a really good experience to just participate and just not place, just like practice, enjoying that I have made this. I ended up getting runner-up in the master's level, and I did not expect that. But what I have discovered is I have a higher level of tailoring than most people. And so when I made this, I patterned it from scratch, and I calculated the pleats on it, which calculating pleats is fun if you like math. And then it had a lot of it had more hand sewing on it than I think people would have guessed. The shawl in particular, all of the fur had to be hand sewn. It's just as fast to hand sew fur as it is to try and do it on a machine. Take my word for it. But I did do the embroidery on the front, that little front tabard. That part is machine embroidery. And do I have a picture of it? I don't know if I have a picture of it. Oh, I thought I had a picture of it. I did, and I must have taken it out somehow. And then I put horsehair braid around the hem of it, which is part of what gives it body. You see horsehair braid. You can come and look at it afterwards if you want. You see horsehair braid at the bottom of a lot of formal gowns and wedding gowns, and it just gives it this nice body to it. But again, it's like these extra steps that a lot of times there's so many parts of a cosplay that you're trying to make that you're trying to find everywhere that you could possibly save time. And I am too perfectionistic and picky, so I'm like, no, it needs to fall this way. I'm gonna do this. And then the part that was really fun about this particular outfit is, again, back to the dyeing. I never thought I would get this much into dyeing things, and also my kitchen shows it. But I was fortunately making it right around the time of Easter, and so those giant Easter eggs that they sell were kind of everywhere, and I picked up a package that had kind of this pink color and this yellow color and thought, I can do this. I can find a way to paint them. And then I remembered my mother-in-law telling me that I could dye plastic. And I thought, why not? I've dyed other things. So I did. And the bottom pink is the original color, and the bottom pink and yellow are the original colors, and the top is how it came out. I think I have it here somewhere, but it really wasn't that hard. It was a really cool effect, and it gives you, like, if you have something that's translucent plastic that you're trying to color, and you know it won't melt if it goes in boiling water. That would be the other part. But if you have a translucent plastic that you're trying to color, Dye More for the polyester will work on plastics, and it really comes out nice and evenly because you're doing it in a dye bath. Okay, so last year, my dear friend, best cosplay buddy girl, made a wonderful Duchess Satine, and she and I used to work together tailoring. She has amazing skills as a costumer, and she threw this thing together for herself and her boyfriend to go to Disneyland. They were, I think, going to the Halloween thing. And she made it, and she sent me a picture, and I went, well, now I need to make the outfit to go with you. So she's like, yeah, you do. So we planned to meet up at a con that had the Clone Wars voice actors at it, and I had about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, because I can't do this unless I can find the fabric. Because again, like with Padme, it's like, well, can I find the right fabric? I was in Washington, D.C. visiting my husband, and I stopped at a couple fabric stores, and I walk in this one, like, upholstery drapery shop, and my mother-in-law had wanted to stop there because she was with us, and I was like, there's probably not going to be anything here, but I'll look. And so I walk in, and they were like, well, what do you need it for? And I was like, I do costuming. And they're like, oh, well, we have a silk room in the back. And I was like, wait, did you say silk? So I went to the back, and lo and behold, they had this iridescent silk that was more or less the perfect match. And they also happened to have this swirly, it's kind of washed out, but they had the swirly kind of gold taupe ivory fabric. And I went, okay, done. I can do this. I've got 2 months. So I started patterning it out. I went through a lot of mock-ups with it, and I tend to start with, if I can, I will start with a pre-made pattern. I'll start with a commercial pattern, and then change it from there, because you don't need to invent the wheel with patterning if you can find something that's close. But you can make a mock-up, you can redraw the lines that you want, cut that, add seam allowance, and do a lot that way. So that's what I did with this, and I think I started with, well, I take it back. I can't remember what I started with for the coat. I know I started with just a basic princess line, A-line dress for the underdress, but I can't remember. I think I had found some kind of overcoat thing that worked for it. But the real beast with this one was, okay, how do I make the gravity-defying headdress? So if you ever decide to do something from one of the animations, you run into the problem of it's animated. It was not created as something for a live person to actually put on their bodies. And you have to also decide, okay, am I going to try and make this as if it would have appeared in Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith? Or am I going to try and keep it very cartoon looking? And I wanted one that looked a little bit more like, okay, this would have fit in with the rest of her wardrobe. So I was really, and when I found that silk, I went, okay, this would work for that. But I was like, okay, now I have to come up with a headdress that looks like one of those more real headdresses that she has. And I thought back to what little millinery I have tinkered with and went, okay, I remember buying this stuff called Foss Shape. And I like visuals, so I brought visuals. Foss Shape is a thermoplastic fabric, if you've ever worked with it before. So it starts out almost like felt, and then when you apply heat and pressure, it stiffens up. And it doesn't become entirely stiff, but the more you heat it, and add pressure, the stiffer it becomes. It comes in a couple of different, no, that's not the thick one. Comes in a couple different thicknesses, and it comes in black and white. And the best thing about Foss Shape is you can sew through it before and after. So you can sew through it, harden it, and you can still sew on it. And for me, with most of my skill set being based in sewing, I was like, this is the way to go. We're gonna try this. So I experimented with that for the first time. I kind of made a pattern of my own head with the old duct tape and saran wrap method, and then cut myself out a skull cap that I made out of Foss Shape, and I pinned to just a canvas wig head. And with the Foss Shape does shrink just a little bit. So I discovered that, first of all, a steamer is what you want to use with Foss Shape. I tried a steamer, a professional iron, and a heat gun, and the heat gun works, but also, like, you can see where this like burned hole piece is if you come up close. That was a heat gun. So it's a little too much. A steamer gives it a nice, like, very even finish. So I made the skull cap, and then I did the base on the skull cap out of just EVA foam with some supports, and then I did a second piece of EVA foam, and it's really, I don't know, again, over on the right, no, I don't want to add a comment. You can kind of a little bit see that there's two pieces of foam glued together at the very top of it, and the one hangs down on the back, and that's the one that I glued all of this hair to. And as I was doing it, realized I learned to sew hair wefts with it, because there was just no other good way to keep the hair all together and even the way that I wanted. So that was a fun new skill to learn with that, and very useful. But I feel like I can't move this at all. That's really annoying. There's one more picture over here. You can kind of see the edge of it. There we go. Down there on the right corner, I started to remake this headdress because I wanted to change a few things on it. So that's the Foss Shape when it's all sewn together. And then I had the other piece glued to the back. And then, let's see. I guess I don't have a picture. Well, you can see on the right side, I've got like all of these pieces of hair that I would then hand sew the wefts around the bottom and then glue them up and over one at a time, and, you know, crying and cursing the whole time. And then once I had that done, I had to create the hard pieces around it, the pieces that were going to go up and over. And I did a lot of that just by draping and making myself a pattern, transferring that to, I think I transferred it to felt first, and then I transferred it to practice foam, and then I did it with like the thin craft foam. My first version of this, I did all of those hard pieces out of thin craft foam, and then I got a little bit more confident, and I went back and I did it out of thermoplastic. I did it out of Wonderflex because it was a little bit thinner, and it seemed like a better fit for this particular project. But it was very time intensive. And I would say the most difficult part of the things like this is getting it to fit to your own head. Making sure that you can create a skull cap that fits you, and then I ran into the problem of, how am I getting this to stay on my head? And with the foam version, it wound up being a little bit too loose on my head, and I ended up brainstorming. I was running a cosplay society in our little town at the time, and I ended up brainstorming with them, and my friend that did the sateen reminded me, she's like, you know what you need? They make those silicone wig headbands, and so they make these silicone headbands that go all the way around. They're covered with little bumps. She's like, why don't you try one of those? That would work great. So I got one of those. I put it on. I'm like, it's still not, it still slides around. And I was like, but I think this is the right track. So I got that, and then really late one night, I went, what if I just add Velcro to it? Velcro is always my last go-to because it snags things, and I absolutely hate that, and so I never use Velcro. But in this case, I was like, I think I might need Velcro. And then I had to go through the problem of I have to figure out how to attach the Velcro to the silicone headband. And I went back to my old go-to. I sewed it on, and it worked. I had to do it with a zigzag stitch so it would still stretch, but it worked. And so that was how I attached the first one. Once I did it out of thermoplastic, that does not have as much give as the other one did, and so it does just fit on the silicone headband. It does, like the silicone gives it enough grip, and it just sits on. So it's really, I don't know if you've ever seen the scene where you see that this particular headdress just go on her head. You can act like that's the way mine works. It just lifts on and off my head over my really goofy looking wig cap. And it's really fortunate because I find that the thermoplastic is unfortunately not as comfortable. I can make it only a couple hours in that costume before my head is killing me and I want it to go away. So it was a trade-off. I like the look of the thermoplastic a lot better. It's not quite as comfortable. And the earrings. I wanted screen-accurate earrings, and that was a problem. So I learned to pour resin and color the resin. And then I realized that the resin molds that I had, I could not find anything that had the right shape on the bottom, and I went, I'm pretty sure I could Dremel resin. So I Dremeled the resin, which I did with a respirator mask. You definitely want to use a respirator mask. And by the end of that, I looked at it and went, okay, the color's too light, and it's too iridescent. So I wound up spraying very lightly with a darker green spray paint over it and then doing light detail work with a little brush on it. But I was really happy with the way that they came out. I was absolutely thrilled. I've only seen, I think, maybe 3 other cosplayers do this particular outfit. And I knew one that I'd met in person, and the con that I was going to C2E2 next, and she was going to be there, so I brought her a pair. I was like, look, I managed to make screen-accurate earrings. So it was a really wonderfully happy, nerdy bonding moment. I actually made this one, I realized, before I made the other Clone Wars. This was my COVID idea. In the middle of COVID, when we're all stuck home and Star Wars Celebration had been canceled, and I was like, it'd be really funny to make a cosplay that was kind of like haha about COVID. Like you need almost, a hazmat suit or a laboratory thing. And then I remembered the Blue Shadow virus and went, that would be perfect. And I've never seen anybody else make it. I don't blame anybody else if they try and stop, because it's not easy. I did it out of neoprene because that seemed like the only good choice for this. I was wearing this yesterday. If you were here yesterday, I was wandering around in this bright yellow neoprene bodysuit. And it was one of those where I looked at it and went, I'm not sure exactly how I'm patterning this. I caught my friend, Duchess Satine. I called her and was like, I need you to come over and draw lines on me. And so I started with a pattern for just a bodysuit, and I don't have a good picture of her drawing the lines on me, but I started with that, and then I think I made it out of just a stretch jersey first, this pink one there. I think I made it out of that first. I think that's from the session of her coming over and just drawing on me, because I made it out of that as a mock-up, rough draft, and went, okay, here's the pen, draw everything on me. And so she did. I stood there like this, and she took her heat erasable friction pen and just like looking at the reference image, drew all over me. Reference images are so much your friend. And if you're trying to do a recreation sort of thing, if you don't know this already, the best way to get a good base for what you want your measurements of something to be, so like what I did for this headdress, you want a picture like, let's go back. You want a picture like this that is as straight on as you can get, and preferably full length. So I know that Natalie Portman is my exact height, which is very helpful. We are both 5'3", but if I'm doing something on the face, so what I did for the headdress is on the picture, like I literally take a tape measure. I almost always do it in millimeters because it's more accurate, and I will measure like from the chin to the top of the headdress, and I will look at that measurement, and I'll look at the face measurement, and I can measure my own face. So I will take, say that the whole thing is 15 millimeters and the face is 1 centimeter in my picture, then I now know that I've got the ratio of, if I divide 10 by 15, I take that number and multiply whatever my face measurement is, and that gives me the measurement that I need, that the height is gonna be. I don't know if that math makes sense there, but it's the best way to get an act. And there's a cosplayer I admire very much who, she's more than a cosplayer, she's a full-time costumer and has been for decades. And she put up something similar. It was a few months ago that she put up that formula and everything, and I was like, I feel so validated. But it works really well for a lot of things. I have found that it cuts a lot of time mock-up wise. So we drew on all of those. I had to practice with neoprene, so I went and and neoprene isn't, I had ordered a whole bunch of yellow neoprene online because you can't go to the store and buy yellow neoprene anywhere. And it had all come, and I should have ordered extra for a mock-up. I just didn't even think about it. So I ran and got just like the bare minimum I thought I could manage with from Joann's or somewhere that happened to be blue and pink. And started mocking up pieces of it just to make sure that I had all of the lines the way that I wanted. And the other fun part of this being I had to mock up that glove because it was a full gloved suit, and none of the patterns that you can buy bodysuit-wise include a glove. So I mocked up the glove and added all of that and started in on the suit. Sewing with neoprene, Teflon needles. If you don't know this, they make non-stick sewing machine needles. Wonderful, wonderful things if you're dealing with something like neoprene. And a walking foot. I can't do that on that. So the hard parts I had a more difficult time with because at that point especially, I had not done as much with foam work and more prop sort of things. So we started out, my husband helped me a whole ton with this, and we started out with doing just a cardboard sort of paper mache backpack, and we got, maybe I don't have a picture of it. Oh, there it is. We got just like a cheap plastic helmet and modified that, and we did the collar, I think, out of EVA foam, this very first one. And it was okay, it worked. I managed to take it over to London Celebration, and I'm trying to remember, the helmet didn't make it, I think. I'm pretty sure I was able to, the helmet and the backpack, I think, just did not survive that trip. I was able to kind of wear the collar and make it work for that trip, but the helmet and the backpack did not survive. So we came back home and we're like, we gotta redo this, we gotta retry. And so we worked on a 3D print of both the backpack and the collar, and we're working on the helmet. And it's tricky because, again, this is an area where it's really tricky that what is designed for an animation is absolutely impossible on a person. And so I can't get the exact lines. Like I would have to cut into my body to be able to get the exact lines that they're getting on the animation. But I did, the first one that I did, I used the rubber hose tube, the same thing they tend to use for the TIE fighter pilots. I used that, and it was too big and too heavy and didn't drape right. So this second go around, I looked and looked and looked for tubing and hosing stuff and couldn't find anything I liked. I ordered CPAP tubing, which is what you see right there. And I was like, this is so close, but it's not quite right. And I finally just kept looking at the picture and went, back to sewing it is. And so I got some black heavier knit fabric that had some stretch, and I think it was a terry knit, and so it wanted to curl on itself a lot already. And I took 2 layers of it and put a really thin layer of batting, and I quilted it essentially. And I put in each of those quilting sections, I put just a few of like the little pellet beads that you would put in like a stuffy or a beanie baby sort of thing. I put a few of those in it to help weigh it down, and then I put wire through the CPAP tubing in the middle, and that did it. That gave me the look that I wanted. It gave me the ability to drape it the way that I wanted. I probably didn't even need the plastic pellets in it, but it made me feel better. And the belt, the very first one I made out of pleather. I made the pouches, and I think the little shape pieces were out of foam. I upgraded all of that. Leather belt blanks are very reasonably priced, so I got a leather belt blank and went ahead and got rivets and attached those to the back of foam pieces that I covered in thermoplastic and did pouches out of thermoplastic, and much more like long-lasting, durable. But I was able to get it from that was Celebration in London, where only the collar survived. We had the 3D printed collar at that point. That was what went on. And then I don't know why I didn't put the third picture on here, but it was, back up here. That's the most recent iteration. That's what I had on yesterday. So that was a big learning curve. That one was a great learning curve. So the one I'm wearing today, now we move out of the less peculiar, unusual ones. Lots of people have done the parade gown. I decided about 4 weeks ago that I just was really sad I hadn't made an episode 1 costume with the 25th anniversary being this year. And I had made the parade gown when it came out, and I thought it would be so fun to remake it. So it did. And I did it in 3 weeks, 3.5-ish weeks, with very little sleep. But it entailed, order of operations, I quickly figured out I had to figure out the dress first before I could do the cape. So I figured out the dress. That was not as difficult. I upgraded the tabard I had found one that somebody had put a pattern online that you could print out, and it didn't seem accurate enough-ish for me, so I retraced and redid and retraced until I liked it. And then I sort of watercolorish painted it with the basic acrylic paints and outlined it in glitter puffy paint, which is actually what the original is outlined in. And then I cut out somewhere between 650 and 700 petals and hand dyed them twice. And that was crazy. I have no good. And then sewing them on, I did mine in strips. What I wound up doing was serging them together about 5 or 6 at a time, gathering them and then putting them on that way. And then I made the original parasol thing is made out of millinery wire, it looks like. So this is my first go at it. I 3D printed the edge pieces. I'm not super thrilled with the way that this particular one came out, and I can't wait to redo it, but it's done, and it wasn't. Millinery wire it takes some practice, I guess, is all I'm gonna say. Like it comes purposely curved, and you really have to like work with the curve. And then I made the headpiece one night after the power had gone out because we had this natural disaster hit, but it's just these foam pieces covered in fabric and hair. Anyway, the next one I'm working on is the navy linen and the buns cloak, and I've actually been working on it for years and years, and again, dyeing. I've dyed the fabric like 3 times because I could not find lace that I was happy with. The only ones I could find was polyester white, and so here we are trying to dye at midnight navy, and it's not cooperating, but I'm almost there. And then I've already got I made trim, learned to cover buttons, beaded that. So anyway, these are like my originals years and years ago. I wanted to redo those original ones that I had done as a kid. Not that they were absolutely awful. In fact, I even brought, this is my original tabard from like when I was 14 or whatever, and made it to there, but I know I'm rapidly running out of time, so I really appreciate you guys coming. I know this was not, oh yeah, I was getting to that. I was trying to thank them first. Okay. No, I really appreciate you coming, and I would be really happy to answer any questions if you do have any questions about these costumes or about any Padme costumes in general, because I've thought a lot about pretty much all of them. And if not, like, there's a really good online community in terms of figuring these ones out too. Lots of people have tried lots of different things. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I actually, I don't know what to do with it, but I have a giveaway. I had decided I was just going to give it to the first person that came through the door because it took so long for somebody to come through the door. So that was you. So congratulations. But yes, thank you so much for coming. Does anyone have any questions?
How did you do the circular bell bottoms on the yellow?
Oh, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about mentioning that. It's boning. Oh. It's boning. So it's, I think what I wound up doing, I don't have that one with me. I think what I wound up doing is there's thinner, almost mesh boning that you can sew through really easily. And I think that's what I wound up putting on it. It was horrible. I took it to my boss at the tailoring and alterations place because I was crying. And she's worked on costumes in Broadway. And she looked at it and she's went, okay, you realize what you're trying to do is really hard, right? Saying, yeah, that's why I'm trying to do it. But yeah, it's boning. Center on it. Yeah, it's fine. They've seen those pictures at this point. It's okay. You have a question? What's your question?
How many costumes have you made?
A lot, especially the ones, including the ones for you. I'm sure I've made at least a couple dozen costumes. Some of them obviously much better than others because that's how you learn. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Do you ever get frustrated? And if so, how do you keep pushing through?
Sometimes I push through and sometimes I don't. Let's put it that way. Exhibit A would be that buns and the linen dress and the buns. I started that, I don't know, 7 years ago, something. I don't know. I've been working on it so long. Just because for some reason it's the bee in my bonnet of I want it accurate. I have done at least 13 mock-ups of the underdress because it's so hard to see where the seams are to be accurate, and I wanted accurate seams. And it's weird because it has princess seams that come up through the shoulder on the front, but they go up and around on the back, and like you can't see it because it's dark and midnight, and like I had to lighten all the images. And I was driving my Duchess Satine friend, I was driving her absolutely nuts because she was helping me pattern it, and she was like, isn't this good enough? And I was like, no, it has to be. She was like, it's fine. And trying to get the pleats around the bump is the other, let alone dyeing the fabric. And I still haven't found velvet that I'm happy with for it. So I find that, but to answer your question a little bit better, when I do power through, having a deadline of like, I'm going to wear this for this, like that's and from all the other cosplayers I've talked to, like that's always our best deadline. And this was an interesting exercise for me because I would normally probably not wear this because I hate the parasol. Like I hate how it came out and I want to like crunch it in a ball and throw it away. But I won't because that's expensive millinery wire. I'll cut that out. So I will probably restart it. But normally I would be like, I'm just not wearing that. But I really wanted it for a picture with Ahmed Best. And I thought, no, this is actually like a really good example of like you should just make something and wear it because like as much as I make it to wear it and be accurate and be perfect, because that gives me great, like, I also make it to wear it, so I should wear it. Like, if it's good enough, wear it. And then, you know, upgrade stuff later. Like, I'll probably just slowly replace things on it. Like, just having that kind of deadline tends to, and I find it really helps to, I never keep to them, but I find it really helps to make goals of like, hey, I'm gonna be done with painting the tabard by this day. I'm gonna be done with the dress by this day. I'm gonna try and be done with embroidering all of this by this day, and 2 months later it's not done. But like, it helps like push me through if I'm trying to meet that. So yeah, those are the biggest things. Yeah.
Have you ever created like a Padme costume that doesn't necessarily appear in the series with something that you think she would end up wearing?
I have thought about it a lot. And I think eventually I probably will do one like that. Right now I have like a list of probably at least like 5 or 6 that I've started gathering materials and thinking about and that I want to do. So I want to get through. The one that actually, I have an idea for doing some that appear in Clone Wars, but doing it in a fun way, to where it's like more or less like a transformation gown sort of thing. And so I really want to do that. I don't know, we'll see. I did this not just in 3 weeks, but my family moves in 3 days across like 5 states, and my husband's been like already living away from us for the past year. So I think I came to the realization last weekend, because I was like, why did I do this to myself? Like, what kind of idiot am I to put this kind of stress on myself? And I had kind of this realization of like, I chose my stress. Like, this was my way of choosing my stress, because then the thing that was most stressful was a happy thing. And I had all this other stress going on, but like, it's okay. Like, I'm just gonna ignore that for right now and be stressed about this, because I like being stressed about this. So yeah, like realizing that and realizing that I am just like, even if I'm more stressed and more busy, I'm so much more happy creating. Like, that's kind of what took me back to all of this the last few years. Was kind of, I entered kind of a mental health journey of like, I need to go back to figuring out like what makes me happy and centered and all of that. And this was a huge part of it. Going back to like making those costumes for the prequels being like some of my favorite memories, and looking at all of it and going, I don't know why I gave that up. I went back to learning how to sew and make costumes. It's time to go back to that. And just, yeah, like doing it. I asked a question on, I'm gonna get better at social media, I swear. But I did ask a question, like just wanting to know why other people cosplay, like what makes them do that. And it was interesting how many of them said, I had definitely a handful that were like, yeah, I just do it because like it's so fun. The challenge of it is so fun, and like my own personal satisfaction, and like getting to practice the skills that I know and everything. Like that's definitely me. I've done some competition, but a lot of time that's to have the deadline. Like, hey, I submitted this, I better finish it. Because it's easy to get to like a certain point and not do that. So, anyway. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is Lady of the Lake Country. I'm not sure I actually said it. It's Lady of the Lake Country. And I will put it up there, because then it has the QR code, although it's probably really hard to scan with how light it is. I didn't think about that. But, oh. I think Mom's got it handled. I know, he wanted to help. It's okay. I'm really hoping, because my background is in education and music education, and I have thought a lot about it would be really fun to just transfer that more to costumes. And so I'm hoping to maybe get a website or something up by the end of the year and do a little bit more education-wise. You kicking me out, please? No, I'm teasing. I'm looking at the time going, I'm guessing they're probably gonna want me to be done. Yeah, welcome. This is my costumes. Yeah, so thank you so much. I won't hold you hostage any longer. Appreciate it so much.